Hey everyone, are you thinking about starting a travel basketball team, but you're just not sure how much it's going to cost, and that question is going around in your mind, and you're not finding a lot of answers out there on the internet? Well, that's what I'm going to do today. Is I'm going to talk about just how much travel basketball costs. Now, I'm a little reluctant to throw out the number that I came up with for my team. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give you the number because I think a lot of you would just probably quit and say, I'm not doing this. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down a list of expenses that I want you to be familiar with, and I want you to think about them because you can come up with less expensive ways to do this than other teams. But that's really what I want you to know is like, what are the expenses that you have to worry about? And what ways can you do, what creative things can you do on your own to make this less expensive for you and your team? So the key budget items that I'm going to run down here, number one is registration fees. So when you start your team, you're going to have to find an organization that you can play basketball with them, some sort of sanctioned group. AAU is probably the most popular, and you're gonna have to pay them to register your team. Now, some costs like AAU, their costs are actually per individual. So you can get your individual players to go online and register themselves. I think the current price is like $17 a player, but let's just say less than 20. And fortunately with AAU, it's like $2 more per individual player, and you can get practice insurance and game insurance that'll cover you. So that's good. The other organizations that I play with, they go by team costs, and you can basically register an entire team for like $350. Okay, so that's really going to be dependent really on where you are in the world and how much they charge. So I would just estimate whether, even if you use AAU, you're looking at paying about $300, or up to register your team. And, sometimes that can include insurance, at least with AAU. If you're going to some other organization where you're registering per team, their insurance might be $75 to $100, maybe $150. But if you decide to do both, just remember you're doubling whatever your registration costs are, but you only need one insurance. So that might make that a little bit better. Also, in team registration, don't forget you have yourself as the coach, you have your assistant coach, you have any parents that are volunteers that are going to help. You also got to pay for them to go through a background check, which can be anywhere from $35, $40 and up. But just keep that in mind as well. The next thing, and this was always one of the most expensive things for me, and that was the gym cost, right? Your practice facility, how much are they going to charge? And, this can really be anywhere from free, to, I'd probably say on average, you're looking at maybe $100 an hour, but don't quote me on that. Every place is so different, and you might get really lucky to get like a church to sponsor you, or maybe you have a friend that, or someone, and through your networking, you can, make some contacts at the local schools, and maybe you'll be able to get in there for free, or just very cheap. But I know, where I'm from, they charge a little bit. I mean, it could be, I think we pay almost $1,000 a month to practice. So just, that can be a really expensive thing, but it's just unpredictable for me to give you the cost of your practice gyms. But I think if you go out and you look for it, you might be able to figure that out. The next thing is uniform and gear. Uniforms, they can be $150 for a set. They can be a little bit more. You might be able to find them a little bit cheaper. But with the uniforms, make sure you're following the guidelines that the organization or the tournaments that you're playing in. Make sure that whatever uniforms you purchase, they're in compliance with those rules. So, for instance, AAU requires numbers on the front and on the back, and they want like a light jersey for your home jersey and then a darker jersey for your away jersey. So just make sure that you're able to comply with those. I can put out a video maybe one day on uniforms, But essentially that's it. And so I would just maybe when you're making the order, and I'll put some links to some companies that I recommend, that'll they'll make sure that you're in compliance with AAU, and usually if you're in compliance with AAU, you're in compliance with everyone. But it doesn't hurt to check the rule book for wherever you're playing to make sure that you are in compliance. But I would say about $150 for one uniform. So if you have 12 players, you just got to multiply that to figure out what your costs are going to be. You're also going to have certain types of gear that you want to buy. Things that I would suggest just starting out is definitely basketballs. Get 4 or 5 good basketballs. I can put some links down below, but essentially just get yourself, you don't have to break the bank, but just get yourself some good basketballs that you can practice with, that are going to last you for a while. And also, depending on what your age group is, be cognizant of what that organization that you're going to play with, what size basketball are they going to use. So if you're playing, 5th graders, and those 5th graders are in a smaller basketball, and then next year you're going to go to a bigger basketball, don't spend $1,000 on basketballs. Just get by for that first year, because that year will go by quick, and you're going to have to buy bigger basketballs the following year. Pennies, practice jerseys, right? Like those are very helpful, so that kids, when you're practicing, they know who's offense, who's defense, who's on what team. Those might be some good, bits of gear that you want to think about. You're probably looking at, you could probably get those things for $25 for a pack of 10 or 12, or up, right? Depending on how much you want to pay. Your basketballs can be anywhere from, they can get expensive, right? Like the Wilson Evolutions are about $75 a pop. So you're looking at anywhere, but you don't have to go with the super expensive ones. You can go anywhere. You could probably spend, $200 to get a couple decent basketballs that you can practice with. I would recommend getting at least one really good basketball. Cones, those are probably the gear that you could get away with, as a brand new basketball team, spending that type of, $200 to $400 for, all of that equipment would probably not be, too far-fetched. Another probably majority of your budget is going to be tournament entry fees. Now these can get pretty expensive. The typical cost probably for your location could be probably $350. I noticed that the tournaments earlier on in the season, December, January, February, they're usually a little bit cheaper. But as you get into the main parts of the season, they get up to $350 and above, right? Like some of these tournaments that you're going to play in could be, almost $500 each. So, calculate that into your equation to figure out, how many tournaments that you want to do. And and you're talking paying $350 a tournament, 3 to 4 games a weekend. You're looking at, $400. And don't forget too, when you register for a tournament, especially most of these tournaments are online, you're going to pay an online fee of like $35, $40, maybe even $50. So just keep that in mind. Travel expenses. So this is really going to depend on how your team's structured. Are you a coach that's going to grab all 12 of your players and rent a van and drive them to and from, your hometown to where the tournament is, and you're going to make sure that they have lodging and food? Because if you're doing that, you're looking at, you're looking at hundreds of dollars a day for lodging and food, and also travel expenses, right? Gas isn't cheap. That's gonna be an expense that you're gonna need to think about. I don't do it that way. I have parents give their kids money, and I encouraged players or parents to drive their players to wherever we're having a tournament, so that they took care of that expense. I didn't have to worry about it. There will obviously be kids that don't have parents that can bring them on certain weekends, and I encourage the parents to take care of finding a ride for them with another player's parents. And of course, they can throw them $100 for the weekend for food, and they can live in the hotel room of the parent that they're transporting. So if you have that luxury, that will obviously cut your costs down really low, and you only have to worry about yourself. So that's an expense that could range anywhere from $500 for your own hotel room, your own food, your own transportation, all the way up to probably a couple $1,000s. Rooms aren't cheap, and neither is food. So that one's kind of something that you'll have to just figure out. Other things that you could come into is if you're paying for coaches, which I really try to drive my audience is more like the coach that plans on doing this on their own without having to pay coaches to come in and coach their basketball team. But if you are, if your team, if the coach is being paid, that's going to come out of the team budget. I have in the past, though, hired trainers to come in and spruce up my team's training, and so obviously those costs can be $100 an hour, and I would do it an hour a week, so that could be $400 a month. But those are other things that that you can expect to pay, although I wouldn't do it my first year as a travel team. But as your years go on, those are just some other costs that you might want to consider. So essentially, these are the costs that you need to look out for. Typically my team would pay $8,000 or $9,000 a year for a travel team. I do want to talk quickly about some fundraising ideas that you can use to bring down your costs a little bit. But before I do that, I did make a Google Sheets document. It's basically a brainstorming budget worksheet for travel basketball. I'm going to put a link to it down in the description below. I do have it on sale right now, but depending on when you watch this video, it could be higher or lower. I think it's a great resource to kind of brainstorm and put numbers into this Google Sheets document, and it spits out how much your expenses for your team is going to be. And then it has a space in there for you to put the number of parents that you have or number of players that you have and how long your season's going to be in months. And then it'll break down how much each parent should pay per month to help you out. I will throw a caveat on that. I would try to get my parents to pay in advance, just so that I wasn't, relying on their monthly payment so that I could go to the next tournament. So I always had them a month in advance or 2 months in advance. But this is a very unique tool that I put together. I think it might help some of you, especially if you're trying to figure out how much all this is going to cost, and it does all the calculations for you. So if you're interested, check out the link below. Now I'm going to jump into some fundraising options that you have as a basketball coach. I know that what I said, $8,000 and up can be very expensive. Figure out where your high ticket item is, whether that's the gym rental or the tournaments, and just try to figure out a way to do some fundraising to just cover that. Like, set up a goal like, hey, our tournaments are super expensive. I want to cut that in half. Have a meeting with your parents and your players and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a car wash, and we're going to do one car wash, and we're hoping to bring in enough money to cut that tournament registration or the tournament fees in half so that you guys have less to worry about. You can also entice the parents by saying, hey, your monthly dues are going to be $100 a month, but we're going to do a series of fundraisers so that you can cut down your part of the payment. So we've done car washes, right, at the local at a local school, or even a gas station or whatever. One thing that I did when the kids were younger was I would just ask the local grocery store if I could have a few slots, time slots per day after school or Saturdays and Sundays, and I would just load up on them with parents and players, And those kids, when they were younger, they would collect, hundreds of dollars a day. And that can really put a dent in your budget and help out with that. There's also some fundraisers out there, and I'll put a link to one that I have a relationship with, and they do pretty cool fundraisers. It's kind of like selling candy bars, but they have like mugs that with the team names on them, shirts. There's some like really cool ways to raise money, but selling things to the kids' fans, right? Like, family members or others, that they can go out and sell these things to them. And they're actually, things that, that parents are probably going to buy anyways. Coffee mugs with the team name on them, the kids' numbers, whatever. There's some good stuff there. I'll throw that link in there. I think they have like a little handout that you can, grab from them that kind of spells out the different types of fundraisers and how much of a profit the player would get per sale. So check that out. That might be one way. You can also do like crowdfunding online. And you can also do sponsoring, right? Like you could give parents a sponsor letter, just make sure that you have all the appropriate legal protocols squared away. But parents could go out to businesses that they have relationships with and ask for them to sponsor their player. And I've known parents that have done that and took care of a lot of their expenses just like that. And there's a lot of companies out there that want to sponsor players because they get a little bit of a tax break, and they get the warm and fuzzy feeling. So that's another good way to do that. So I don't want you to think that starting a travel basketball team is going to cost you a fortune. I know it's expensive, but there are ways to make this happen. And if you think about it, if you got a 12 or 15 person team, you can really reduce those costs down to a minimal expense. You can also cut costs, right? Like you can practice outside your first year. It won't hurt your team. Just be careful with the pavement or whatever, but you can certainly do it. You can also minimize the number of practices you do inside. You can work out deals, maybe a local church to do some yard work for them for free in exchange for some gym time. So I hope that this was helpful. If one thing that you could do to help out our community here is if you have a travel team and you experience different prices than different expenses than what I talked about, or the same, put them in the comments below. Let us know how much your travel basketball program cost you each season. I think that would be definitely helpful for all of the viewers that's watching this video. Thank you.